Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date and help the channel grow. We really appreciate you spending some time with us today. And now, on with the show. You are listening to the Narrated, Not the Popular Opinion with the one and only Gray. Greetings, opinion nerds. It is I, the one they call Gray, and we're traveling back to the world of Pandora to splash around with the Na'vi and James Cameron's Avatar, The Way of Water, on this random act of opinion coming up right now. You know, it's like my mother always told me, opinion nerds, sometimes you gotta keep it simple, stupid. There is virtue in simplicity. Movies that feature labyrinthine plots and complicated character dynamics can be a joyful challenge. Whip crack fast and clever dialogue stuffed full of literary references, metaphors, or double entendres can be almost like music, and the poetry of a well-written line or the sting of a witty retort can be fun to let roll around in your head. But with cleverness comes a tendency towards insincerity. Complicated can skew towards confusing, and complexity can be alienating for those not up to the task. Sometimes you want a film to be welcoming to the largest group, and that requires a level of simplicity. Being simple doesn't mean being unengaging or looking down on the audience as if they're children beneath your intellect, but it does require the creation of an experience that provides complementary value to whatever the storytelling goal is, as what you lack in text must be made up for in filmmaking. Challenge and complexity are necessary for the growth and maintenance of a healthy cinematic mind. But there are those times when you want something that just says what it means and means what it says in a straightforward way so we can all reap the reward of that universal openness. The downside to that simplicity is the possibility that no matter how good it all is, there just isn't any compelling reason to come back, and we'll all have to ask ourselves if that's a good thing or a bad thing. More than 10 years after Jake Sully, Neytiri, and the Na'vi rescued Pandora from the grip of rampaging human industry, the family they've raised finds themselves in danger from the unexpected return of an old enemy. On the run in a far-off land, they must learn new ways as Jake struggles to protect his family from the oncoming threat. Directed by James Cameron from a screenplay by Cameron, Rick Jaffa, and Amanda Silver, the film stars Sam Worthington, Zoe Saldana, Sigourney Weaver, Stephen Lang, Cliff Curtis, CCH Pounder, Jamie Flatters, Britton Dalton, Trinity Jolie Bliss, Jack Champion, Bailey Bass, and Kate Winslet. Although the movie may not be complex, there are still some surprises, so we'll do our best to keep spoilers to a minimum. The release and unprecedented success of the first Avatar in 2009 was overshadowed only by the length of time it's taken for Cameron to complete the dual productions of the film's first two sequels. Its critical and financial success was roundly criticized by a segment of the audience that has only grown as film franchise loyalty has become a priority akin to sticking by your favorite burger joint. Initially looked at by critics as a derivative work trading in alien blackface, cultural appropriation, and the ultimate example of spectacle over substance filmmaking, the negative conversation has been compounded by a confusion over how a film that was seen by so many could have so little apparent cultural impact, mostly exemplified by the lack of memes and parodies, which at this point seem to be the measure of a work's cultural penetration. This was briefly and ridiculously joined by the shouting of radical Marvel fans when, after Avengers Endgame became the top-grossing film of all time, Avatar was re-released and regained its spot at the top of the all-time unadjusted box office chart. That Cameron has voiced his unflattering opinion on Marvel's approach to storytelling hasn't earned him any points with that group, not that it seems to be keeping him up at nights worrying about it. What many considered the genius of the first Avatar, its accessible simplicity, was also seen as its greatest weakness. Cameron's career has been built on relatively simple, straightforward screenplays realized in spectacular fashions. Whether it's Titanic's clash of classes wrapped around a simple love story, or Alien's battle of overwhelming odds layered over the story of a woman facing down her nightmares, Cameron's films have never been about being tricky or clever, their emotional weight conveyed through his filmmaking more than the depth or complexity of the text. While films like The Terminator and True Lies have been allowed to be simple, entertaining action pieces, mostly devoid of controversy for anything other than the director's sometimes insane pursuit of extremist perfection, Avatar seemed to trip over some feet in its efforts to graft its action experience onto a broad environmental and anti-colonial message unappreciated coming from a, quote, rich white man. While the film series seemingly languished as Cameron mined new technological depths and the IP seemingly absent from pop culture during the ascendancy of the MCU, Avatar continued to live through its various Disney theme park areas, the world of Pandora existing for many as a living, breathing space they could inhabit. The disparity between the presented reality of the critics and the observed reality of the everyday doesn't seem to have slowed the deluge of negative speculation for the sequel, as many individuals and outlets predicted or even hoped for the new film's failure, seemingly based on a dataset pulled only from their curated peer bubble and entirely absent of the memory of how loud the noise for the first film was when it was released, creating the impression that the sequel to the most financially successful film of all time somehow has an uphill battle to either match or exceed its predecessor. And while the sun still has a long way to set on this latest trip to Pandora, as our tour guide, Cameron seems to be approaching the trip with the same even hand as the first time out. The Way of Water is not a radical reinvention of either Avatar as a film or Cameron's approach to storytelling. The screenplay delivers information in quick, efficient bursts and even finds an in-narrative reason to translate the Na'vi language into modern colloquial English. It might lack the stylization that makes it feel as if it comes from a unique culture, but it becomes clear that relatability is the key component of the presentation, especially for the younger characters as, if anything, the film seems positioned to be more family-friendly than the first, reflecting the new status quo and shift in priorities for the main adult cast. It isn't difficult to see what information is being set up as important, and that might read to some as obvious in an amateurish way, but it reinforces the ideas of accessibility with very simple setups and payoffs. The film is broken into very specific segments, loosely mirroring the structure of the first film. This could be seen as a lazy copy-paste by some and a calculated reintroduction to the series by others, especially as future sequels are set to release much more quickly than the decade-long break between the first two. Just like with the first film, there are a number of practical and VFX achievements spearheaded by Cameron's team to make the film possible, which will receive a lot of the focus in the ongoing conversation. And just like the first film, all that impressive work by itself will be dismissed as largely meaningless techno-drivel making up for a thin screenplay. But it can be easy to forget that the point of the research, development, and implementation of all the high-power computer graphics isn't just to put them on display in a vacuum, but to use them to capture performances, craft an experience, and ultimately tell a story. Much of the efforts of the developers went into being able to capture real performances underwater, but in general, the idea is to be able to shoot and edit the motion capture performances the same way you would any other common footage. In one respect, it's entirely fair to say that the Avatar films are basically animated movies. The great majority of the footage is realized through the use of computer animation, and in that way, they aren't appreciably different from any Pixar or DreamWorks release. There are, however, key differences between how the animation is used in the Avatar films that put them in a different category. Most animated films are guided by the philosophies of animation, an understanding of its unreality and how to manipulate that for effect. Generalized as cartoons, the simplification of forms and exaggeration of detail, motion, and expression are what give that work life and make that art form what it is. The idea is to sell these images as being as real as possible, not just for the look of it, but because a greater illusion of reality has a very different psychological and emotional effect on the audience. The more realistic things look, the more we believe in the reality of it, and the more emotional weight we tend to give things. This is not an across-the-board experience, and this is not to discount people who can easily invest in other types of animation. But across the audience spectrum, this will generally be an observation that will ring true, and that broad swath of audience is what Cameron is aiming for. Most importantly is that the animation is being driven by human performances, with the motion capture tech being very focused on capturing facial expressions and body language in excruciating detail, so the performers don't have to exaggerate as much to get their performances across. Animation is driven largely by the power of exaggeration, where live performance is driven largely by the smaller, more subtle aspects of human expression that are almost impossible to recreate through artificial means. Where the Avatar films have built their bridge over the uncanny valley is that while human performance drives the animation, the characters look far enough away from human that we don't experience the same discomfort we do when looking at attempts at photoreal human renderings. It's a dirty trick to play on our brains, but it works, allowing the filmmakers to use the emotional wealth of human performance and human expression without making the audience uncomfortable. This bridge between live performance filmmaking and animation is what makes the Avatar films and others like them unique from cartoons. What Cameron and others, including George Lucas and Peter Jackson, have been trying to do is remove the shackles that shooting a VFX-heavy film tends to put on a filmmaker so they can simply capture the best performance on set the way you would shoot any other film. VFX don't replace story, they never have. What VFX do is allow filmmakers to tell stories the way they imagine them. The Way of Water is all about family, and the solid core of the emotional experience lies with Jake trying to find the best way to protect his. While presenting a great action experience the way Cameron often does, featuring detailed military hardware and tactics and putting the audience as close to the action as possible for maximum effect, the film is primarily a dramatic presentation that spends a great majority of its time with the younger members of the family discovering their new world. This is where the bulk of the film's runtime exists and likely where many of the less engaged audience members will find themselves lost. However, this is not simply world building or showing off what the tech can do. The immersion in the world and culture of the water Na'vi, like that of their tree-bound cousins, is to both contrast their harmonious relationship with the biosphere to that of the human invaders, and to show the audience what it is the Na'vi are fighting to preserve and why it's worth preserving. If the audience doesn't understand the value of what's being fought over, it becomes very difficult to get them to join the perspective you want them to share. Cameron knows how to use all the tricks of cinema to manipulate the audience's emotions, but unlike a lot of blockbusters, he doesn't do this in an insincere way just to get an emotional reaction. The characters don't joke, hoot, and holler their way through the action. The combat isn't presented as if an entertaining roller coaster, and there are consequences to the fight that the movie doesn't sidestep. Cameron wants to impress upon the audience that the things that are happening matter, and this is not a goal every blockbuster film shares, as many of them are afraid of being accused of taking themselves too seriously. Everything sticks to the rules of the narrative world, and everything has a logical flow. There is no cheating, and there are no shortcuts. Cameron's approach seems to be very simple. Tell a simple story in an easy-to-understand manner. Don't look down on the audience or try to prove you're more clever than they are, and tell the story in an emotionally honest way. Yes, the film wants to be entertaining, but taking the approach that entertainment isn't valuable if it's dishonest or disrespectful of the audience is a mark of integrity that will suffer the loss of those who feel their amusement should be the only priority. The film culminates in a finale that pays off every previously established element with the exception of one or two questions left unanswered for future sequels. And like the previous film, it's bookended by recontextualizing a statement made at the beginning, bringing the piece full circle. It's a deceptively simple skeleton that leaves plenty of space for both meat and the fat that gives it flavor. The length of the film at a little over 3 hours is the director taking the time to build the experience. This is not a film which requires a breakneck pace to build a visceral climax. Even with the action, the climax of the film is emotional, and building to those emotions takes time, not just because of the number of characters, but because, like waves, you don't want to have everything crash down on the audience all at once. The time taken helps build the false sense of security that you slowly feel eroded as the Sully family's enemies slowly zero in on them. To try and cut the film down to the bare essentials of the plot would risk losing some of its most emotionally engaging elements. To be perfectly transparent, Avatar is not a movie I've thought that much about since seeing it in 2009. I thought then, as I do now, that it's a terribly well-made film, a production on par with some of the most stunning achievements in filmmaking. But as far as my experience goes, the simplicity that gives the film its near universal accessibility also contributes to a lower level of rewatchability. I feel like I'll be able to say the same about The Way of Water. It's an incredible film, not just technically, but in terms of storytelling. I felt every emotion was gripping the armrest during the finale, finale. It is, by every measure, a great film, but I can't imagine being in any hurry to rush out and see it again. I just recently watched the first film for only the second time since its release, and it still holds up as an incredible piece of filmmaking. But one problem with Simplicity is that it doesn't leave a lot left over for repeat viewings, which is where I feel I'll end up on The Way of Water as well. I can't stress enough how fantastic I think the film is, how well crafted the experience is, and how well the whole thing is put together. But for me, I kind of feel like I got everything the first time, and what I didn't get right away I don't think is going to tickle my brain that much. We didn't get a chance to see the film in either 3D or HFR, so I can't gauge how engaging that experience might have been, but just the standard presentation alone was enough to elicit a pretty strong reaction from me. It's such an odd reality, and likely what's led to the impression of the series as a whole. It's not that there isn't any there, but it's such a complete and succinct statement that there isn't really a lot left in the text to dissect. The fact that the various Pandora-themed attractions have been as consistently popular as they have been, combined with the first film's $143 million plus in home video sales, makes the statement that the film didn't just vanish into the ether. And a great number of people seem to have completely forgotten that people were so invested in the first film when it came out, they were experiencing literal withdrawal symptoms. But at the same time, it's been 13 goddamn years, and I don't know who's been paying attention, but a lot of shit has happened between then and now. I think the world can be forgiven if a science fiction film released over a decade ago isn't on the tip of the general public's tongue, no matter how good it might have been. The terminally online community of movie people, of which I am a member, there is no doubt, has a tendency to forget that we are no representation of either the height or breadth of film discussion in the world. Between Twitter and Reddit and various unaffiliated yet entirely inbred message boards, there's a thickly walled bubble that, were it to burst, the deafening loss of their own amplified voices would surely drive most of these people insane, because all that would be left is the high-pitched whine of their own insignificance. I suppose someone in my position should be talking about any of the manufactured controversies desperate to attach themselves to the film, but I honestly have no interest in them. Any attempts to criticize the film on the basis of its lower textual similarity to something like Pocahontas or Dances with Wolves or Ferngully strikes me as fundamentally ignorant of the differences between plot, story, and experience. A movie's experience is not created by what story is being told, but by how that story is being told. That's why you can have multiple versions of King Arthur or Robin Hood or even the story of Jesus Christ, and each of them can be a unique experience despite being essentially the same story told again and again and again. Now, the basic story of Jesus alone bears a number of similarities to other messianic deity myths, but you don't hear anyone complaining about Jehovah ripping off other supreme being plots. Maybe this is why the first film isn't considered to have a cultural impact. There isn't really anything there to rally behind to either condemn or defend, not in the kind of extremist way the internet loves to do. The fact that there isn't any ongoing back and forth over it tells me that the so-called cultural critics just haven't been able to make anything stick. If the dearth of ridiculous discourse is the price to pay for a lack of cultural impact, I would gladly pay it 1,000 times over. Would I watch the film again? Absolutely. My second long overdue watch of the first film was a great experience that I enjoyed as much as I remember enjoying it the first time. The family aspect of the second film gives it a level of maturity that even my terminally childless ass could appreciate, while the teen character's exploration of the world provided the same level of wide-eyed excitement the Jake Sully character had in the first film. Am I in a hurry to see it again? No, but it has nothing to do with any problems I had with the film. It's good. It's very good. It's a really good piece of filmmaking, but I guess there just isn't anything in it that really speaks to me, so there isn't really anything in it drawing me back. That's not a bad thing, it just is what it is. I have nothing but praise for the film, but as much as I admire its simplicity, I do find it all a bit simple. Simplicity is a tricky thing to manage. For some, it can bring a comforting sense of reliability, while for others, it results in blandness. Avatar: The Way of Water is far from bland, but the accessibility and its lack of textual complexity is a confounding virtue that seems to have led to a great deal of audience approval while leaving critics feeling less than satisfied. If one knows director Cameron's work, there should be little surprise to find that being the case, and I'm personally a bit dismayed that this doesn't seem to be taken into context by people who, by all accounts, should know better. Simplicity can be a virtue, and it's one we love to pretend we place great value in. But complexity is just more interesting. One approach isn't better than another because, like everything else in filmmaking, they are tools for creating an experience. How you use them is what matters. This has been the Narrated, Not the Popular Opinion. As always, I have been Gray, and if you like what you heard, you can leave a tip at our Ko-Fi page at ko-fi.com/notthepopular-opinion. You can follow us on Twitter at @only_Gray, and don't forget our main page at notthepopularopinion.wordpress.com, where you'll find more great articles just like this. Thanks again for listening, and remember, if you're as good to others as you are to yourself, we might just make it through this mess. See ya.